it's been honestly so cool. I've spent so much money and so much time on courses or like this sheet on Etsy or like this Pinterest thing or like tons and tons of like the stuff is valuable. I can see why it works. I just don't understand why it doesn't work for me for very long, or I can't quite get it, just doesn't end up working. And I'm like back to the shame of like what's wrong with me. So the fact that this is like a course that's literally comparable to the way my brain processes is the only way it's been able to work.
Are you overwhelmed by motherhood and barely keeping your head above water? Are you confused and frustrated by how all the other moms make it look so easy? You can't figure out how to manage the chaos in your mind, your home, or your family. I get you, mama. Parenting with ADHD is hard. Here is your permission slip to let go of the Pinterest-worthy visions of organization and structure fit for everyone else. Let's do life like our brains do life, creatively, lovingly, and with all our might. When we embrace who we are and how our brains work, we can figure out how to live our lives successfully and, in turn, lead our families well. At the end of the day, we just want to be good moms. But, spoiler alert, you are already a great mom. ADHD does not mean you're doomed to be a hot mess, mama. You can rewrite your story from shame spiral to success story. And I'll be right here beside you to cheer you on. Welcome to Motherhood in ADHD. Hey there, Successful Mama. It's your friend Patricia Sung. Today, you're going to meet Amanda, who is one of the students in Time Management Mastery for ADHD Moms that we started back in October. Now, we recorded this coaching call back in November, about 2 months after she had started the program. And this is for the Coaching Connection, which is a group that I guest teach in probably 3 or 4 times a year. And I happen to need someone to coach, and Amanda volunteered to be the victim. Just kidding. Now, I went into this thinking I was going to help Amanda work through some of the stuff that, like we're like dead smack in the middle of working through all of our modules. And I was absolutely floored by how much Amanda had learned about her ADHD in the very short time since she had been diagnosed. So like many moms, she was learning about ADHD because one of her kids, she thought, had it. And when she started reading, she was like, oh, wow, this is me, which happens a lot. And she actually had just been diagnosed in September. So keep in mind, this conversation is maybe 3 months from when she found out that for sure she's got it. And sometimes impulsivity is good for us, right? So Amanda literally signed up for the class the day that she found me. So why am I sharing this? We often get stuck in these negative patterns of like, I can't change, I keep failing, I failed before, what's the point of even trying? It's just going to be another failure. And when we get stuck in that mode, it feels forever. Like we have a really rough sense of time, and a lot of times things that are temporary feel like they're going to be forever, and they're not. I want you to see that you can make changes even if you are just figuring out that this is how your brain works. Or if you've known a really long time, like it doesn't matter. Whenever you are ready to start digging in and figuring out how your brain works, like you're ready to make changes. You're ready to go for it. Is it easy? No. But you can make the changes at whatever point you're in, no matter how early or how late you are in the journey. There is hope and there is possibility that is there, that you can do life in a way that is different, in a way that fits you, that fits your family, that fits your brain. It is totally possible to figure out, how do you make your life fit you? How do you create systems that make sense for you? Like, how do you make time to sit down and teach your toddler shapes or your preschooler letters, or to have a heart-to-heart with one of your teenagers? Like, we can create space in our day where we have time for that good stuff because we have order and control over what we want our day to look like. But yet with a structure that's flexible enough that fits our brains, that we don't feel imprisoned by it. Because remember, our tools are meant to serve us. They're meant to be a help to us. They're meant to fit into how we need life to work. Now, Time Management Mastery is opening later this month, and I want you to hop on the wait list so that you know when it's ready. And also, have the option to jump in at the beginning because there's some really great bonuses for the mamas who are there in it to win it with me from the get-go. So before somebody distracts you, click on over to the website. It's bit.ly/TMM waitlist, bit.ly/TMM waitlist, in case you're not a fan of spelling. Head over there, hop on the waitlist so that way I can let you know as soon as it's ready to go. Because mama, it is time to stop suffering. It's time to stop feeling like crap. It's time to stop beating yourself up. I want you to have the tools that you need to figure out how to make a life that works for you. So after you hop on the waitlist, go ahead and listen to this conversation with Amanda, where you get a little sneak peek into what it is that we're learning in this program and how it can help you figure out your day. You are getting a sneak peek inside a one-on-one conversation with one of my students, Amanda. While this is probably the longest episode I've ever done, that's because it is so full of valuable strategies that you can implement right now. I just couldn't take that away from you. So, for background, this conversation is when Amanda was working through the 5th of 6 modules that are in Time Management Mastery for ADHD moms, where we are learning how do you look at your usual schedule through the lens of an ADHD brain. Now, Time Management Mastery opens on February 17th for enrollment, but if you join the waitlist, you'll not only get early access to sign up, but an extra bonus for supporting early on. So there's finally a reward for being impulsive, right? In fact, I'm calling it a VIP bonus for a very impulsive person. Now, enrollment closes on February 24th. So if you're listening to this later, don't fret. I plan to reopen in the spring, so get on the waitlist again for that reopening. Now, come on, meet Amanda as she starts us off with sharing a little bit about how her life looked at the beginning of the pandemic and how she got her ADHD diagnosis.
In going through the pandemic over the last, almost 2 years, like 20 months or something, I experienced like a complete breakdown in like understanding myself as a mom. And so like, as we've discussed before, we were, put in very different circumstances than we were used to. Our transitions were different. Our rhythms were different. Like so many things were different. I didn't know that I had ADHD. And so I also had a 2-year-old at the time who was turning 3, and his behavioral challenges were so severe over the course of that next year that it made me start doing things for him that led me to my own evaluation and diagnosis, which is helpful because as I'm finding out, ADHD is so genetically given. And so that's been helpful. He's getting help that he needs. But this recent diagnosis was helpful for me. I felt overwhelmed at first with oh my gosh, where do I look? And I just prayed on it for a second and thought, okay, I do really well with podcasts and audio processing because I can fit that into my day, and I'm going to start there, and I'm going to search for a good podcast that is bite-sized and I can start learning about it, and then I'll figure out where to go. And that's how I found you, Patricia, which is amazing because you, at the same day that I found you, were just launching a new course. So that's how I ended up in the Time Management Mastery course that I've been in for 6 weeks, maybe. Yeah. We're getting close to wrapping up, and I have been really, really, really enjoying it. So thank you. It's been honestly so cool. I've spent so much money and so much time on courses or this sheet on Etsy or this Pinterest thing or tons and tons of this course, and the stuff is valuable. I can see why it works. I just don't understand why it doesn't work for me for very long, or I can't quite get it. Just doesn't end up working. And I'm back to the shame of what's wrong with me. So the fact that this is a course that's literally comparable to the way my brain processes is the only way it's been able to work. So it reminds me of my 4-year-old who's now having to learn preschool in a way that works for his brain. It's literally the exact same thing, but for the mom.
Yeah, it's been, I was oh, there's so much to dive into there. I think there's so many moms who are in that same boat where in the pandemic, we lost all of our support systems, all of the coping mechanisms that we had in place, the people that were helping us if we had, outside help, whether that was family or, daycare or school, whatever it was, literally all the things that we had supporting us just went in a moment. And then here we are, like millions of moms looking around being like, why is this falling apart? And generally speaking, women, especially those who have inattentive, are diagnosed in either some kind of major life change or a hormonal shift. So the life changes are things like, starting a different job or having kids or moving, like that big, like the things that I had in place are no longer there, pandemics. And then in the hormonal shifts, when, a lot of girls are diagnosed in middle school, when they start their periods, when we have kids because of all the pregnancy and postpartum hormones, when we hit menopause, like these are the times where all of a sudden our body is thrown out of whack, and it is far more apparent that we have an issue. So, one of the parts that like all my classes come with a weekly support group, and we meet for 30 minutes. And it's like, all the moms are like, send help. Like it's a universal thing. And when you have that group of people around you, that's like, okay, I get it. Like I'm with you. I understand. I'm there. Then you don't feel so alone, and you don't, excuse me, you don't feel like you're the only one that thinks this way, and you're the only one who's messed up, and you're the only one who can't get together, and the only one who needs 17 planners and it still doesn't work. That like
moments happen where someone's talking on the support call and you just get to like be lighthearted and laugh at someone else's story because you're so able to relate to it, and you've been stuck in that shame spiral for so long of being like, why am I the only one that's like this? And it's like, it's just so different to be around a bunch of other people who have similar experiences that you're just like laughing with them at, like, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like in the moment you can laugh because it's like, okay, now all of a sudden there's not that heaviness of it being me. I'm not the problem. All these people are having this problem. And like, not to say that we all want problems, but when it's not you, me, I'm the problem. And it's like, oh, okay, this is a theme, and we can figure out like, how does our brain work and what are the strategies that fit? It is like, just like so life-giving, and yeah, like all of a sudden you can feel lighthearted because until then it feels like you. And it's not, because I mean, generally somewhere between 5 and 10% of people have ADHD, which is inclusive of moms. So while we feel like we're the only one, if we look around and we have 10 friends, I mean, we're one of them, but probably there's another one in there. And the people who are struggling are like, kind of like us, who are like, well, if I just hold it together, then no one will know. So when we don't have that like open vulnerability, then we don't know anyone else is struggling. But it's a lot harder to do when, it's the people who are important to you and you see every day, like to like crack the door open. It's like, well, I can't close that door now, so I don't want to show them that. Whereas like when you're in a support group, it's like, okay, everybody's on the same page, and I don't feel like I'm going to be judged because I forgot this thing 7 times last week. Someone else is like, don't worry, I already forgot it 10 times. Like there's that, just that reassurance there. So, it's been a beautiful thing. Like not just for all the women, but like for me too. I just like, I walk out of that Zoom. Well, I like walk out of the Zoom call. I leave the Zoom call just feeling really encouraged. So
yeah, because you built that space for other people to have that community, and it's really, really helpful and life-giving, like you said, especially because like in my evaluation, it was overwhelming to understand that like, wow, this ADHD or like executive function processing, because I just feel like ADHD is hard for other people to even understand the title, because it's like, I don't actually have it in my attention. I actually have too much attention. Yeah. And like that's really more of my problem. Then I get worn out because my brain is so tired. Then I have an attention deficit because I'm so tired from all that. So it's the name is really inaccurate to portray what it is, unfortunately. But like being able to see from the evaluation, like, oh, wow, I was struggling here and here and here and all these different points of my life. And all of a sudden I'm 35 and being diagnosed with this. And now I'm like, well, shoot. But what happens is it's almost as though the skill sets and tools that we relied on during the time that you were struggling with it earlier on got you only so far. And was successful. And then eventually those things that I was relying on, or whatever tools the other person is relying on, stop working for that set of circumstances. and I literally felt broken. And since ADHD comes with so many other layers of things, I was constantly misdiagnosed with depression or anxiety. And then I would do therapy, which I loved because it's always helpful to process. But then I had recently a marriage therapist. You're in a pandemic with your husband and we're just totally different and doing things different. We're in the same space. And he's like, are you sure you don't have like something else, like a bipolar, or like maybe it's just depression, like so bad? And I was like, I don't have anything that I can think of that's like making me feel depressed other than like the circumstances that I'm in with this household, with these children. And his answer was, well, we don't live in a vacuum. And I'm like, no, you don't understand what I'm talking about. Come to find out, he and his wife has ADHD, and he didn't even realize because it presents so differently. And it's just so interesting. And then once we talked about it, he's like, oh, now I totally get what you're talking about. Just took a couple of sessions for him to really like grasp the whole thing, because that was like one of our first sessions. But anyway, the misdiagnosis thing is the part that I was really trying to stress, is how challenging that can be when you're first coming to the realization and like the learning process.
Yeah, because usually if you're not diagnosed in childhood, when you get to be in your like 30s, 40s, I mean, I've been seeing women who are getting diagnosed at like 60 and 70. I'm like, good for you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you made it this long without knowing, but like, that's amazing that you kept looking for an answer and you weren't sitting there like, just like, well, this is just how it is. Like, to still push forward is, some big props. But anyway, I'm getting off track. Where was I going with that statement? Oh, is that when we get that far in life, like we clearly had issues, there was something going on. And usually what we end up getting diagnosed with is the anxiety and the depression. It's like, well, yeah, for sure you're anxious because you're constantly wondering why you can't keep up with stuff. For sure you're depressed because you always feel like a failure. Like for sure you feel chronic fatigue because when you have ADHD, like your energy regulation is like far more like roller coaster. And there's going to be days, especially for women, in depending on where you are in your cycle, of like, hey, I feel great. I'm like rocking at life. I'm like, this is so great. Like I can totally do this. And then 3 days later, your hormones shift and you're in a different phase and you hit like, through ovulation, all of a sudden you're like, and my life is terrible. Like that it feels like a roller coaster because you don't understand where you're going and you don't understand the path you're on. But when you start to put all the pieces together and you're like, oh, like when I see where I am in my, like in my cycle, I can now, like when I'm putting the patterns together, it's like, oh yeah, okay, after my period, I feel like this. When I get close to my period, I feel like this. And you start to put those pieces in, it's like, well, yeah, you were getting a bipolar diagnosis because in that time of a month, you went from being super happy to super sad. Mm-hmm. But when you see the pattern, it's like, but it literally is like, we're on a pattern here.
Yeah,
and then it's like,
I don't think it's a brain chemistry thing. I think it's something else.
Yes. And so when we start putting all those pieces together and we can actually make a difference. And like you said something and now I can't remember what it was, but it reminded me of like understanding all those coping mechanisms that get us to a certain point and then don't quite work. It's like, I equate that to somebody speaking in a different language and they are like giving you the instructions, say in French, and you're like, well, I don't speak French, but like I can get by enough with like the gestures and the pointing and like the words that kind of sound like English to like get a good portion of it, but you're not getting all of it because they're not explaining it in the language that makes sense to you. And that's where, like, I guess my goal was like, I put together this system for me. I didn't put it together for anyone. It was like me being like, how do I get my life together? And when I finally like pulled all the pieces together, because the same thing for me, it's like, I looked at all these, I read all the books and I listened to all the podcasts and I followed all of these like gurus of productivity. And it's like, well, I'm doing the thing they said, and yet it's still not coming together. So like I pulled all these pieces and made it into a system that makes sense for our brains. And it gives us that flexibility of making sense for us. And like, yeah, there's going to be some days where I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And when you have the freedom to say, is it really that you just don't want to do that? Or is it like, well, you're about to get your period, so maybe you should lower the bar. Like, is this an appropriate time to lower the bar? Or is this a time where it's like, okay, how do I change the way that I've approached this so that it makes sense for me? And I'm like, oh, do I want to get down that rabbit hole? No, I need to stay on track. So let me give everyone watching kind of a run through of like how the class works, so they can kind of like meet us where we are, because we're jumping in the middle. So like Amanda mentioned, she's in my time management mastery for ADHD moms. And I have two classes. There's daily planning for ADHD moms, where we go through like your calendar and your to-do list portion. It's kind of like a foundational thing. Like, you can't set the rhythms and routines in your day if you keep forgetting to like show up for things, or I forgot I had a doctor's appointment today. Like, you're never going to get your routine in line if you don't have your calendar set and your to-do list, like understanding like how to prioritize that. So that's like foundation level 1. Then we get into time management mastery, is like the big picture of how do we set up our day to make sense for us? Because we hear this word time management, or I guess the phrase time management. It's like, what are they saying? I don't really have any sense of time. You're asked, like, people are like, well, you just time yourself and see how long it took you to do that. And I'm like, well, then I had to remember to set a timer and write it down. And like, whatever I estimated surely was not correct, because in my brain, I'd be like, that'll take me 5 minutes and it's 20 minutes. Or I'm going to be like, this is going to take forever, and it takes me 3 minutes. Like, there's no, it doesn't go together.
How do you manage that?
Right. And so when we're looking at all these tasks and trying to figure out like time management in like air quotes here, it just doesn't make sense to our brains the way people are explaining it. Like, they're expecting us to understand how time passes. They're expecting us to be able to estimate correctly. And like, while we do need to consider some of that stuff, like, we can't just throw it all up. We can't be like, minutes don't exist and pretend like time is, in your head or whatever. Because like, and because a lot of people be like, just, it's society and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, when you're a mom, that's not an option. I can't be like, stick it to the man, I'm not showing up for stuff. Like, no, I still have humans to take care of. They still have to show up to school on time, or, soccer practice or dance rehearsals, or they need to eat lunch. And like,
because that's what I was running into too, with a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 6-year-old. I was like, okay, the middle one definitely is showing these difficult signs of it. But then even with the other two so far, I said to my husband, I don't necessarily know if they have full blown ADHD, like the trait or whatever it is, or if they've just been learning executive function skills from an ADHD mom who's really that's not my strength. Executive function skills is not my strength. So like, they show poor executive function skills in certain things. And I'm like, oh, okay, so like, this is important.
Yeah. Because like, it's even something as simple as like, if I tell my kids, hey, we're gonna do this for 5 more minutes. If I don't set a timer, my 5 more minutes could be 10 minutes or 15 minutes, or it could have been 2 minutes if I'm done and don't want to do this anymore. Like, there's no indicator. So when I say 5 more minutes, my kids in their head, 5 minutes could be anywhere from 2 minutes to like 20 minutes. They don't know, because I'm not teaching them that skill.
Like that's with transitions. Like, my kids have the hardest time with transitions, because I also have the hardest time with transitions. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the times I'm like, oh, well, I got 2 more minutes before we have to leave. I could throw in one more load of laundry. And then I'm like, shit, we have to leave. But my kids are like so little, I don't have any estimation of time in that mindset of like, it takes them forever to get their stuff on, to get in the car. And I did not budget for that.
Yeah. And that in our brains, when we say like, we have to leave at 2:00, our brain then says, it's 2:00. It's time to walk out the door. Our brain doesn't say, okay, well, how long does it take to get the bags ready, to put shoes on? Like, our brain doesn't backtrack and say that 2:00 means we need to leave at 1:30, or that like, including like the driving time, or that we need to do any kind of like preparation to exit like that. It's like this magical time warp that doesn't exist. So when we know that that's how our brain works, we stop expecting ourselves to just leave at 2:00. We have thought through like, okay, well, how long does it take me to get out of the house with my kids? If I estimate, like, what am I going to pick? I'll be like, I don't know, like 15 minutes. That sounds good. But that kind of like, then I'm like, is that not enough? Is that too much? Because old me would have been like, oh, that's like definitely 5 minutes. We can get out the door in 5 minutes. That's definitely not realistic. But when I back up to 15 minutes, it's like, well, yes, if your kids can all get their stuff on themselves, 15 minutes might be realistic. But if you have a 2, a 4, and a 6-year-old, then you have to be the one physically putting on shoes. You're putting on 3 sets of shoes. Like hopefully your 6-year-old can, but maybe they're not in the mood and you have to help them. Like we're taking the activities of one person and now you're multiplying into, I am now brushing teeth for 4 people. I'm doing shoes for 4 people. I'm putting on coats for 4 people. And all of a sudden that estimation is very clear that it was a terrible estimation, but it's not until we sit down and look into the details and be like, is that doable for us?
Yeah. And that's where the time management mastery, like functionality, like in your course, it starts with like the first few modules are more related to like understanding your patterns and like actually like thinking about these things conceptually. And that's like a little bit, you're kind of getting your toe in it and you can do those activities. And then when we started to have to actually like look at the stuff in the, on the second half of the modules, it was really challenging to like look at those things, like to really make yourself think about those things. But because I at the time felt so committed to figuring it out and the language was just seemingly like seamless in me understanding it, I was like, no, you're gonna do this. And as I went, it just kept like feeling like more relieving because it was like making sense, even though like all my problems weren't solved immediately because you can only do a little at a time. Anyway, it just like that was part of it in what you're saying. Like you have to look at those granular pieces of it that we never look at.
Yeah. And like, it's okay. Like, that's not how our brain works. It's all right. Like I don't want us to ever feel like we have to be somebody different in order to be successful. Me expecting my brain to do those things when it's never going to do them is only setting me up to fail. Whereas if I go in and be like, hey, I have a terrible estimation ability. I'm going to write down what I think it's going to be. I'm then going to turn around and ask somebody who actually understands time and be like, hey, does this make sense to you? Like, does this sound good? And like, if it's ever my husband, he always laughs. He's like, no, that's not. And he shows me, and that's one of the things I asked him, like, can you walk me through, like, where does this not make sense? Because that's going to help me build that muscle. Do I ever expect to be like bodybuilder level time manager? No, but I know that I can improve some, and that's okay. And then I'm going to build in the strategies, or like I like to call them bumper pads of like, like when you go bowling and you put the little bumper pads up, it's like, I will probably still crash into the walls, but I put up my security buffers that hopefully I won't, fly off the side. Is it going to slow me down? Yeah, my ball's not going to be speeding down the alley at top speeds because I crashed into the bumpers along the way, but at least I got there and everyone's alive. So, so backing up, time management mastery runs through it's 6 modules. The first 3 are really about the setting up the framework. So understanding our motivations, like, why are we doing this? And because if we're not bought in, we're not doing it. So we have to understand ourselves, like, why are we doing this? What's the point? What are we getting out of it? And then we go into the framework of understand like how we're going to set up our day. And we go through obstacles of understanding not only what is going to be hard for us as someone with ADHD, but then also as a parent dealing with the kids, preparing for those obstacles. So it's like, like you said, it's like, we're like dipping our toe in. Then we hit module 4 because 4, 5, and 6 are the ones where we're actually getting in there and writing down stuff. And it is overwhelming because our brain doesn't think like that. Our brain doesn't do things. Skill. It is. It's a brand new skill. And for most moms, when you look at all the things that you do in a day, it is very overwhelming. It's like, what? Like, to go from usually what you feel like is like, I didn't do anything today. I didn't get anything done today. Nothing happened today. I wanted to get all this stuff done and I didn't. I got nothing done on my to-do list. And we think we didn't do anything, air quotes. And then when you actually put it on paper and see everything that you are doing in a day, all of a sudden you like flip-flop pendulum swing to the other side. And you're like, there's no way. How am I going to get all this stuff done? And we hit that like overwhelm point because it is a lot. Like, as moms, we are expected to do above and beyond what most other humans are accomplishing. And especially in the times that we're in right now, where we still haven't quite gotten all those supports back in place. Like, maybe we have some, Maybe you still have none, depending like on what your personal situation is. You may still be at the no support to like a little support. We're still not back at where we were beforehand. And even so, if they weren't the skills that fit us, then they may not have been serving us that well. Anyway, this is a really good time for us to figure out what makes sense for us so that we can start building those pieces together. So what Amanda and I are going to talk about for the people listening in is we're looking at the foundational schedule that she put together. So this is one of the first steps, is that we look at just like, what do you do every day? What are the things that you're responsible for, that you're doing, that are happening in your household, and being able to put that on paper. And again, this is a little bit hard for our brains because it is a little more theoretical, because our brain immediately wants to be like, well, not every Tuesday. I don't do that every Tuesday. Should I put it on the thing? And we start asking like 400 questions, like a little bit of like, okay, like it's okay. Like we don't expect this to be a perfect copy. It is a rough draft. The first time we put it together, we're going to change it probably 15 times as we go, when we realize like, oh, wait, I forgot this, or let me change this. And I forgot to write in, like I put swim lessons down, but I forgot to write down, like we got to drive to swim lessons. So I need to add that in. So the first time that we do a foundational schedule, it is literally just like the rough draft. We put it on the paper. And in case you haven't heard of a foundational schedule, it's the building blocks of your day. What are the things that you, generally speaking, do every day? And with fair amount of regularity. Again, we have ADHD, so it's not going to be, on the point. And that's part of it too, of like, when we make these schedules, the point isn't to like military time our day. We are not shooting off rockets. We're not saving lives. I mean, maybe if you're a doctor, but like not with your schedule, right? Like we don't have to get into that like super minute detail, which is overwhelming for a lot of us when we think about like, well, am I going to have to account for every single minute of the day? No, like we're having like an overall plan. And what that does is a couple of things. It allows you, one, to recognize how much you do. So that feeling of like, to me, it's almost like a feeling of, I don't want to say worth, because like we're worthy in how we do, like we're worthy because of who we are and we're human. But like when we see, okay, look at all these things I'm doing, it helps us counteract that, like I didn't do anything today mentality.
Yeah, I think it like helps protect your own self-concept and like protect you from the shame and guilt feelings you have from that sense of failure or that sense of frustration or like the negative feelings that you have in a day. And as you were talking, it was making me think of exactly why this felt more approachable for me to even do versus what I've tried in the past, which are probably things that are common recommended things for people to do. And with a neurotypical functioning brain, perhaps that makes sense and it works for you. But like it was so different, even though we were looking at all the things that we do on a semi-consistent or pretty consistent basis in a day, or in the next section, you'll look at like, what are you jumping out the puzzle and what do you do in the whole day? Like all of that. It was like, what's different is when it used to be like, okay, the night before or the morning of, I'll just make this big long to-do list of all the stuff that needs to happen today. Well, as you're thinking of it, whether you have ADHD or not, it doesn't come out in any kind of like sequence of like, any kind of order. So like for somebody with ADHD to try to like naturally prioritize that without like decision fatigue, without frustration, without like, you're never going to end up doing it in a day efficiently. So no matter what, you're never going to avoid failure in that day. You're not going to get things done efficiently. You're not going to, it feels really defeating at the end of the day. Or I've had like therapists recommend in the past, let's just write down like what an ideal day is. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be like, and I'm like, an ideal day. I don't even want to commit to my ideal day in my mind because
calm down.
I might want to like change my ideal day. I don't want the same day every day. How about that? Like, so that doesn't work for me either. So neither of those ways work. Whereas this was kind of like, you generally eat breakfast, right? Like around what time every day do you eat? That's like the first step. But you generally have dinner for your family as a mom, and you generally must serve your children lunch unless they are all being served at school, which yay for you, one last task, But like, but there's like certain things you can put in consistently to kind of get you started.
Right. I'm like, oh, you have learned so much, my little girl supper. I'm so proud of you.
I'm so happy.
Because like, these are all important things. So like, so I would say, I'm like, I don't know if the replay can see the chat, but Camden's cracking me up. Like,
which ideal day?
yeah, which ideal day or which like, and also the problem is like when we with ADHD set our sights on the ideal day, we then think that our day is supposed to look like the ideal day. And as a mom, it never does. It never does. Somebody threw up, somebody peed somewhere, and I got to clean that up. Like, oh wait, I forgot I was supposed to bring poster board to school today. Like, there's no such thing as an ideal day, especially as a mom. So it's like, what are we going for here? Like, this is crazy.
My ideal day is like a passion thing that I love doing. I would love to jump down a rabbit hole until I feel satisfied for that day. And then I want to go like order food and snuggle with my kids on the couch and like be silly. Like, that's my ideal day. How do we do that?
I didn't have to do any laundry or cleaning anything. And it's like,
or meal plan, none of that.
Yeah. Like that's nothing. And so like when we're looking at this foundational schedule, like you mentioned, like one of the analogies that I use, like when we're setting out our day is the puzzle. Like the first time you open that 1,000-piece puzzle and you dump it on the table and you're like, where do I even start? And it just feels like a mess. That is the building block of your day. So we're starting with like, we're literally just trying to match up two pieces. Like we're doing a little bit of time and you will get there. You'll get to the point where the whole puzzle's done. But at the beginning, it just feels like a big giant mess and overwhelming because you start looking at like all the stuff that you are responsible for as a mom. And it's like, ugh, because as someone with ADHD, like we need to have it all written down or it doesn't exist. We know that if we don't have it accounted for in some way, we're going to forget. But the problem is when we're trying to write down everything all the time is that that's when you get the to-do list of 642 things. And there's no way you're going to get all those things done in a day. And then, you know, if you show someone who's neurotypical, they're like, why would you write down eat lunch on your to-do list?
Because otherwise it doesn't happen.
Right. And that's not like, I have to make sure that I have accounted for that time because otherwise, even if I stop and make my kids food, if I don't make the note of like me, I need to eat, all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's 3:00 and I didn't eat. Like I fed everyone else, but I didn't feed me. Or if you're working from home, you just power through in hyper focus mode. And all of a sudden, you know, it's 4:00 and you're crashing and you can't do anything else. And you're like, oh, because I didn't eat. And so when we make this foundational schedule, we are one, having like a realistic look at what our day truly looks like. 2, 3, and 4, whatever that stuff is we just talked about. Next, I was like, I should have like numbered these in my head. We're looking at putting down on the schedule the things that we do that are repeatable. So for us, like for example, if we're writing down every day that we need to like, oh, I need to make sure I make that phone call and I need to make sure that I put laundry in. It's like, well, but you do laundry a lot. So if you're putting laundry on your to-do list, you're now making your list even longer. And it feels really overwhelming. Whereas when we start to create this rhythm and routine and we're incorporating all these things that we do normally, that's taking them off the to-do list and putting them in where they belong. And we don't end up with this like scroll of a to-do list. And then when you start putting all the pieces together and you're finding where they make sense, that's when you start to build the efficiencies. So at the beginning, it's not efficient because you don't know it's going to work. But then once you have your
approachable
patterns,
it's approachable because you said you have the patterns, but you're not, I don't have to put like wake up at 5:30 a.m. and do this because that's not happening right now. And that is, I have to work towards that. And you put it right in the class that like, and sure, if that's a goal, you can work towards that, but let's start with where you're at. It's almost like you're going to reverse engineer from like where you're trying to go. Yeah. And so right on my foundational schedule, I put like 7:30 a.m. or 7 a.m., like jump out of bed and see where the kids are at and getting ready for school. Cause that's like what's happening right now.
Yeah. And when we start to build our routines, because we are very optimistic and idealistic people, we think like, okay, in my routine, I'm also going to start working out and I'm going to do some meditation and I'm going to visit my grandma once a week. And then we put like all these ideals in. It's like, you can't change your life and wake up a new person tomorrow and magically be doing this ideal schedule because it is not sustainable. You can't throw away everything you've done and start something new tomorrow and think it's going to stick. It won't. I mean, maybe there's a person that works for it. I don't know. But when you have ADHD, that's not how it works. So we want to start with like, what are you actually doing? If you're rolling out of bed at 7:30 and it's usually like your alarm clock is your kid peering over the edge and being like, I'm hungry, then we need to start there. We can't start at 5:30 yoga. That's not realistic. Like, let's start where we are. We can get to 5:30 yoga later. Let's start with where we are right now.
Decide it's even important to you later. That's what's so cool about it.
Yeah. And again, like when we come up with these plans, we think of like, well, here's what I want to be, and I'm going to make that plan. And it's like, but then you just made the plan for like Amanda version 7, and we're still at Amanda version 1. How are we going to get from version 1 to version 7 if we skipped over all the middle steps? Like, yeah, of course you failed. That's not possible. So it's like, we want to start here. Where are we? Let's layer on till we feel good about it. And it's like, then, okay, now let's do another thing. Let's do another thing. And I know our ADHD brains are like, well, I don't want to layer. I want to do it now. But I think when you get to the point where you're ready to make changes, you know, the way you did in the past didn't work. Mm-hmm. And you know what, maybe I can try this different way. Even if it's like, I don't want to take it slow. I don't want to build habits. But it's possible when we do it in a way that makes sense for our brain.
Yeah, you're really good in the explanations of the videos at saying like, you know, really nice, like just naturally, like I think I recommend doing it this way. And then your brain's going to tell you, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Don't tell me what to do. And like, and it always makes me laugh. And then I'm like, yeah. And then even when I catch myself thinking about that, it's so easy to think like, oh yeah, how many times have I tried to wake up a new person and do it all perfectly that day? Like I know it doesn't work, and you've joked about it. So it's like, we lighten it and then we move on. Right. Plus, by doing it the way that you've laid it out, I've truly been able to like see even just little bits of like how it feels more natural or more relaxed or just like more like working for me, that it keeps me kind of keep going a little bit. And then I can actually see progress in the little changes versus like, I'm a new person today. And then by 3:00, I've like totally wheels are off the bus. And like, yeah. I'm a worse person by 3:00 because I can't even do what I normally do anymore because I'm so exhausted and spent.
Exactly. And that's the key there, is that, you know, when you have ADHD, generally speaking, we don't have quite as much of an energy tank as a lot of people. So when we spend the whole morning trying to do something new, we have used all of our energy up, and then we don't have the energy left to do what has to get done. Mm-hmm. So creating these, like the rhythms and routines, it is about creating efficiency. It is about getting all this stuff done. But also, to me, more important to me is, how do I make this easier for myself? How do I use less energy to do the stuff that has to get done so that I have space in my mind and in my energy to actually do the good stuff? Like, how do I make space for hanging out with my kids instead of grumpy me trying to throw dinner together and yelling, stop asking me questions? Like,
you do that too?
That was yesterday. It was a long day. Yep. If we're using up all that mental energy all day on being a new person, then we don't have time to be fun mom. We don't have time to be engaged mom because we used up everything we had trying to be 5:30 a.m. yoga mom when we weren't even like get up at 6 a.m. mom or 6:30 or 7 mom. Like, we were still roll out of bed at 7:30 with one eye cracked.
Yeah. And then you brush your teeth. Don't brush your teeth because you don't have time. Maybe we'll get to that later. Maybe we'll forget.
Exactly. So I was like, I feel like we really got it in there. Like, yeah. That was a good overview. So what I want to do for the last section here is I'm going to attempt to see if I can share my screen. Let me pull this up and see. And I would say, and in true ADHD capacity here, you can see my millions of tabs that I have open. So that's how I roll. Okay. So what we're going to do, let me move this over here. Okay. So in our foundational schedule, what we're looking at is, again, like our generally what we do, and we don't want it to be unrealistic. We don't, like, if you don't eat breakfast at the same time every day, you don't feel like you have to put it at the same time every day. Like it's okay to move it around. Like I love that you have like realistically breakfast is, I'm like, and I don't know if you can see can you see my cursor when I point?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
Like I love that you have breakfast at a later time on the weekends. Like let's not pretend like we're waking up and eating breakfast at 6 on Saturday if that's not what you do. Like don't feel like I must be a new person on Saturday. Like that's okay. And that's part of the process too, is being okay with like honestly what's on the page too, because it's not just a like part of the reason this is hard for us is not just that like we're looking at everything that we're getting done, but we're also like having a come to Jesus moment of like, you know what? I say that these things are important to me, but they're not in my schedule right now. I say I want to work out, but I don't have it on my schedule. I don't actually do that. And it's a reminder of like, by the way, you failed at working out. And I don't want it to feel like that for us. Like we will get there, but this isn't a moment of like pretending that we do all the cool things. This isn't the moment of like being idealistic one day. Yes, one day we will, and then we'll change the schedule to make it fit what we're going to do then.
Exactly that. On that exact point, that was one of the things I was hesitating on in doing it. Was I was like, wait a minute. I looked at the calendar. I'm like, okay, there's only 7 weeks left of the year, and one of them is Thanksgiving week, and they don't have school. So what the heck am I going to do that week? And then 2 of the weeks are Christmas week, and we don't have school. And then one of the weeks I have a bunch of appointments, which is an abnormal week. So why am I making this foundational schedule for the next 7 weeks that's not even normal? Plus, I then said I'm getting my son who's under the evaluation process for ADHD. He's going to start going to a special school to help with that. And that starts January 3rd, which is a completely different schedule. It's way further away. So I'm like, why am I doing this? And then I heard you say on one of the videos, and even though things are going to change at some point, you're learning the skills. And that has been so important because I do know this now, and I didn't freak out about it. And then it was easy. Like because the copy you have on here is the one I sent to you, but I did like edit it a little bit, I did my own iterations a few times to kind of like make it,
and that's
like
good. You
feel
should.
right. Yeah. And then I copied it over to like appease my sense of like anxiety. I copied it over and I was like, do you want to look at what January looks like? You can. Like, it's okay. And it was so easy to like look at that. And I didn't go too far into January, but it was like nice for my mind to see that I did translate it, and it was quick and easy.
Yeah. And that's the thing about motherhood is that our kids are always going to be changing. It's like when you have newborns, they change a lot. You hit the toddler phase, like, well, we're doing Mother's Day out. It's only 3 days a week for a couple hours. Then we're doing preschool. Oh, wait. Oh, it's Christmas break. No, it's summer break. Oh, wait, we dropped a nap. And it's like this is not like, it's not written in stone. It's not forever. And it's not meant to be. And as long as like, when we have the permission to be like, this is just for right now, it's like, okay, I'll be all right. Because yes, my brain too wants to be like, but in January, this is going to happen. I have to be prepared. It's like, yeah, it's okay to think ahead. But also, if we're so worried about what's happening in January, like, do we really want to throw away the next 7 weeks?
I think it was my brain too, looking for a reason to procrastinate and not do it. Because that's a natural ADHD like habit or like tendency. Is I was like, well, I should just push this off for January, or maybe I should just look at January, and then back to, oh no, I'm just learning the skills.
We're learning skills.
And then I thought by January, I'll really know how to do this.
And you will. And also like, it's important to note too, of like, once you get the hang of this, like you don't have to create a foundational schedule forever and ever. This is a tool that you're using right now to understand your time. And you're going to use this for the next few months. But then once you like you understand your day and how you function, this will be ingrained in your mind, and you're not going to be doing foundational schedules for all of time. Like maybe if your schedule has changed a lot and you feel like I need to kind of like pull it together and I need that mental picture, you might do it again, like say like at the beginning of the school year to kind of get yourself like grounded and
because that's a big transition to go from the end of school year to starting school, and that would help a lot. That's why like my September is always like a really hard month for me, like emotionally, with emotional regulation, with just like mood swings. It's just because it's a huge transition for everybody. And if you are not regulated because it's stressful for you, then your kids are more stressed out, and it just kind of is like this cycle of stress. But the other thing too that I was thinking is, even in doing this, like this isn't even the point, is just having this like foundational schedule and now you're going to follow it. The point is this is just like a skill of being able to have a visual, to have understand the concept of time. It's not even like to commit yourself to a schedule. It's not at all. This is like this has literally just taught my brain how to like understand the concept of time for right now. And then we do the next parts of your modules and it's like you just keep learning. It's just, I don't know, it's just really cool the way you've broken it out so that I then keep learning the next skill and it kind of builds. And then like you said, eventually I might not even need to do this until there's something that's changing that this would be a helpful tool.
Exactly. And once you have the tool, it's like you can pull it out anytime. But like I think part of what scares people with ADHD when we think about schedules is like, now I'm going to have to follow this schedule every day forever and ever. And I feel like I'm in a prison and there's no creativity in my life and it's going to be awful forever. And it's not. The tool is there to serve you. It's not there to make you feel uncomfortable. It's not there to like make you feel burdened or stressed out. It is there to serve you. It is there to show you like, where do you have spaces of time? Where are like, when you think about your week and you're like, okay, this is a really big contention point for our family. We really struggle at like, let's pick like a random time. Maybe like nap time is really hard for us. And I've noticed it tends to be on the days where I'm doing double pickup drop-offs. It's like, okay, I now can see this is what's going on in my day right here. What is it? Like, where's the ADHD or mom obstacle that's popping up right here that I can do something about? But when we just start thinking about like, this day is horrible and everything's awful, our brain doesn't go back and like,
but even
back through the
and you even
information
just
the same way.
Pointing out that time slot on here, I hadn't even thought about it yet, but it reminded me that again, it's a transition for me, but it's also the transition for my kids. So it's also an opportunity for like poor children cooperation moment, which is like increased stress, like more difficulty, more time, more whatever, like more depleting. And so there are other points in time, like on the second page, like on Tuesdays, my daughter has a lot of dance classes in a row. And so when she comes home, it's like a compressed dinner and bedtime for her. And that has its challenges. But now that I've like seen why it was so far off from other nights, I know why Wednesday mornings she's awful. And it's like, I kind of understood that. Like I knew she had a later dance night, but what I wasn't understanding is that like, oh, but if I really commit to like some one-on-one, really walking her through her Tuesday night bed routine and she gets like extra time with me, and like I'm really like involved in the structure of the process instead of like, hey, go brush your teeth, I'm doing this, it makes it more efficient. It makes her like, she's got those like feel good feelings. And then she does it, she stays more on time, she gets better sleep. It impacts the next thing. With ADHD, I've never really thought how things really connected that way, or like how to like do something in one time slot so that it helps another time slot later. That doesn't occur to me.
Yeah. And I love the phrase, I think it was you that had brought up the whack-a-mole phrase of like, here's what happens on Tuesday night is you're whack-a-mole. You're doing all the things and you're getting all the boxes and everybody got where they need to be and everybody got food and we brush teeth and we're in bed and we're done. And we never stopped to like breathe and realize what level of chaos that was for us, what level of chaos that was for our kids. Cause like when you're looking at all the writing that's in this block, it's like, okay, this is clearly going to be an issue for us. Not to say like, you don't have to change what's going on. You might look at that and be like, you know what, that's probably not a realistic thing. Maybe next time we move that dance class to a different day. Or you might just say, I know that this is going to be hard for us. So like my spouse and I are going to come up with a plan of like a more like delineated responsibility of who's going to do what, so that it's not the like, you brush your teeth, I'll be back later. Like, and there's always strategies we can implement when we know what we're dealing with, but when we're just whack-a-moling, then we don't notice.
And when I'm whack-a-moling, like because of the whole like dopamine like issue with an ADHD brain, like as I'm getting resistance from my kids, it's like a dopamine depletion. And so then I just am like, you know what, I'm not gonna deal with this. I'm gonna go like change laundry really quick and then come back. But then that just delays the whole process of like bedtime because I'm trying to like regulate my emotions and my dopamine instead of being like, okay, if I just know that like this time period is dedicated to them and I'm going to enjoy the moment. I've actually found more like joy within some of the motherhood tasks that I had been losing or had lost because I was just in such a bad place with all of like the giving and the pandemic that was like never ending. it still isn't ended, but like, it's like, it was never ending. Like you went so far and then no, keeps going. So like, it's just a hard place to be. And like looking at it this way, as hard as it was to do this, like I put off even doing this for like a week. I was like, I just couldn't quite figure it out, but I was like ruminating on it the whole time. And then I was like,
your brain needs that.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, let me just play around. And so I started playing around with it and I just kept playing around with it. And then it was making more and more sense. And then as I moved on to the next module, we can talk more about it another time, but like I realized some of the hangups was actually because I was doing things that come in a later module without realizing it, because I was trying to figure it out to do it, which I'm sure that has happened to other people too. It's just a matter of like, oh, okay. So some of this I think is still not quite right, but I learned the skill.
Mm-hmm. It's like the layering comes together as we go. And it's hard because like our brains want to see the whole picture. So it's like, I want to give you a full picture, but also like our brains can only carry so much stuff at one time too. So it's like this balance of we need to see that end picture or else our brains have trouble picturing where we're going. But also it's like, if we know too much, then it's like, now I'm overwhelmed and I don't know where to start.
Right. But I also have
hard balance.
Any like house tasks or anything on here other than like a prep or a cleanup on certain things at certain points, because I'm wanting my brain to just see what I've committed to as far as like our schedule of things. And then, we move on to do that layering where you would add those in. But as I was doing this, if I started to think too much about those tasks, I would just make them on a separate list, which now I know we use later.
I see Camden popping in. I'm like, I can keep going, but I know we're running out of time. Camden, how much time do we have?
Well, my baby's asleep, so as long as she's asleep, I guess. My husband's up and on a call and she's asleep. No, this has been amazing. Why don't you guys just take a couple more minutes if you'd like and just kind of wrap it up, and then we'll go from there. It's great. This has been so validating in so many ways. Awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just like do like a really quick review, like a quick scan, and just see like, do we see anything that stands out to us that is like, either that you've double booked yourself or is unrealistic, or like basically like where are the problem points that like I should probably do something about that. And you don't have to know what that answer is right now, but mostly just like this is something I need to circle back to. So like you jump in if you see anything.
So the original problem point that I really saw right away was our bedtime thing, simply because there was no consistency to it. So it was hard to put in the foundational schedule when I was like, well, shoot, like some nights I'm so depleted or like low on dopamine that it drags on and on and on because they're not cooperative or whatever. But by like looking at the patterns of the other part of the day, I was able to see like, oh yeah, bedtime on this day usually is one of the days that it's really long. What's happening in that day? Like, and it's all in one place that I can see. But also I kind of moved ahead without knowing it because I didn't know what was ahead. And then I actually chose the bedtime anchor as like the opportunity to like rework it. I know you advised against it, but for me, I felt like it was impacting so many other areas of my feelings and stuff. And since my kids are so little and it's tasks that my husband and I divide and tasks that like we're both responsible for, like we split on most nights as long as he's able and here, or if I'm able and here. And also I felt like bedtime is tasks that are like so consistent. Like we always do these things, and there's like, and also my kids have some buy-in to bedtime because even when it's exaggerated and too long, it's still the same thing. Like it's not like different. So I did really work that over and then have been fine tuning that. And then because we do it together often, he's like a built-in accountability partner. Our brains function differently, but I did kind of bring up to him like, hey, I'm going to try to do this different. Here's where I feel like I struggle and why. And I'm understanding this because I'm new to understanding my ADHD, like just behaviors and processing. So here's what I need from you. Here's what I want to do. Here's where I think I'm going. And we just really talked through it. And he's like, okay, if you think it's going to make it better, sounds good. We'll do it. Let's try that. And we did. And again, it's not perfect at all. We've been trying it differently for about like 6 or 7 nights. And some nights we've like nailed it and we're like, oh, that was cool. And then other nights it's been like, pretty good, better than before. And then we've had like some off nights, but like we're still able to like pick apart those patterns. So like that was helpful in fixing the bedtime part.
Yeah.
and giving us more time at the end, because again, like some nights, sometimes they wouldn't fall asleep till like 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night. And there's so little that's like not okay. And it never used to be like that. So we just need to really rein that in, and that affects our mornings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think also it's helpful to recognize like, one, I'm proud of you for sticking with it. Cause a lot of times like we try it and it works well. And then as soon as it doesn't, we're like, well, that was a mess. And we let go. Right. And a lot of what we talk about in the class is being persistent over like being perfect. Like the more you persist and the more progress you'll see, it's like, yeah, we are putting kids to bed, not tiny robots. There's going to be days where they just don't, whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. They don't, whatever. And that's okay. Like that's part of being a mom.
Mm-hmm. But it's not that every single night anymore, right? Because that's like way too depleting. So if you get those off nights, you're just like more capable of handling it. So like that really got worked out. And now that I'm in the next module, I'm able to even like tweak it more based on like what we're doing. But it's, again, there's not a lot of tasks outside of like the actual tasks. So it's different. Where I'm still struggling now though, or what I was going to look into next, is like the regular part of my day, like the middle of my day on the first page. There's so many inconsistencies that like, even though I don't want to have the same day every day, there's so many start and stops that I'm like, oh, that's what's making me so crabby. But seeing it on paper, I didn't even want to write it on paper because I get crabby living it. But like putting it on there, I was like, yeah, I'm resentful that I've committed to this and this. And like, I shouldn't have signed up for that. Duh. But now that I've seen it, I can be smarter about being like, oh, actually, this is where is a good time for me to make appointments if I can. Or like, this is a good day to sign my 2-year-old up for a class. He doesn't need to be in a bunch of classes, but this is the day that actually works. Before, when somebody would be like, when are you available for appointment? I'm like, I don't know.
This time sounds good.
If I don't have anything that I think that I know I'm committed to, if I don't have another appointment that I've already committed to, like, I think
I'll be there.
But I'm not looking at it out of like what makes sense out of convenience. And maybe that's your other course that I kind of want to do next. But like, but that's the point. Like I actually can see it differently other than like just like opening up a calendar.
Yeah. And actually we talk about this in module 6 is like understanding, like, for example, like if you realize, okay, on this date, gymnastics class just isn't working on this date, you have that information now. And instead of just feeling frustrated at the end of the day on Wednesday, you now know it's like, okay, well, here's the problem is that I put 1, 2, I got to pick up like here, like, and I have all these things on Wednesday. I like overbooked myself for Wednesday. And you can make the decision of, does it work better for a family to just smash everything into one day and be done? Or is that just too much for us? And we know that we need to look for it on a different day. And so like, maybe you can't scrap gymnastics mid-semester, but at least you know for next time, okay, well, then I'm going to move it to a different time. And I did, because
those patterns helps. Previous to uploading this, his occupational therapy, which is in the pink section on the bottom, like now it's going to be at 2. It was previously at Wednesdays at 9 a.m. And that was a pain, or it was at Thursdays at 9 a.m. And it was just a pain because it's like, what am I going to do with this 2-year-old? Sit in the car for 45 minutes while the other one's in there. It was just like, things weren't making sense. It was just a lot of shuttling around. Whereas I saw a better opportunity in my schedule for where to put it.
Yeah. And part of what we look at when we get further through the course is to like, where do those things make sense? Like we have our day foundation, but it's like the things that aren't every day, where do they make sense? And we'll go through all those patterns and figure out how to piece those pieces in. But like, we can't like derive our week around one thing once a week. We need to start with that base layer of what are we doing every day, and then we can layer on the weekly and the and
the monthly tasks. About it, I'm feeling like emotional because I'm thinking about, even like I know we're approaching like the end of our time, and I'm like, oh, what am I going to do next today? Because I just didn't budget anything for right after this because I want to have some flexibility. And I thought, oh, well, I have about 45 minutes before a car pickup. I'm going to go like play with my little 2-year-old who's taking his nap. I'm going to wake him up a little early from his nap and have some quality time with him. Whereas like before, that would have never occurred to me. I'd have been like, oh, I gotta like catch up on all this stuff. And it's like, no, I actually like don't have to do that at all. And I realized that those moments that I fit in with them now makes them so much more cooperative, makes them so much happier, makes them so much more balanced. Like it really is different as a mom. And I had always had that in my mindset is like the best of intentions. Like, I want to make room in my schedule and get better and be more efficient so that I have more time to like be with them and give them all this quality stuff. Like if I opened up this cabinet behind me, you would see like all kinds of like educational preschool type stuff that I've never even figured out how to do with them because I can't figure out when to do it or how, or like all of that. Yeah. And it's like such a waste, such a missed opportunity, and the time passes. So this is like, even though I'm not even through everything yet, I'm noticing those little things that just, I'm calmer. Like I'm just not as stressed.
Yeah, and the knowledge of what your day looks like is what makes you feel confident. It is what makes you feel capable because you know, and you're not whack-a-moling hoping for the best.
That's like reactive. And I never knew how to like be more proactive. Like I was always like reactive parenting. And it's like, I'm like, how do these people get like proactive parenting? I have a really good girlfriend who's like, every weekend she sets up 5 stations for her kids the night before. And on Saturday mornings, they do 15 minutes of paint and then they do 15 minutes of Play-Doh. And I'm like, I don't understand how you do that every day. But she's a teacher and she has a very neurotypical linear brain and it works for her. Even one day I was like, can you come to my house on a Friday night and Saturday morning and like just show me how you do that and see if my kids will cooperate before I make the effort. And I was like, never mind, that's never going to work for us. But I'm like, good for her that she's able to do that. But now I'm able to get in an ADHD style, those moments and that stuff. And I can't wait to see what happens next but thank you. I owe you like such a huge thank you for helping me feel better. Basically, that's like the biggest take home is I just feel better.
Well, thank you. That's all I can ask for. So. I was like, I mean, that's a really good note to end on. I'm like, I could keep going, but like, I know, Camden's got a baby, so I don't want to.
Yeah, and people probably don't want to watch us go over every minute detail of my schedule.
I'm like, I don't know where she went, but all of the same, I can keep talking until she shows up. Oh, there she is. Okay. I was like, did the baby wake up? You're so close. Okay, so I'll wait till she pops back on. Camden, we're ready to wrap up whenever you are, but I will talk in the meantime until you are ready. I'll let you get the baby settled before I pass the baton, right? So just as a like, I guess like a final wrap up thought is that so that's what I would do next is just go through and like look and see like where are the places where I know I'm going to have issues, thinking ahead, how can I change it? Especially, I mean, the good part is we are moving into like, the holidays are kind of a crapshoot on routines and schedules and all, and we accept that. But knowing that
we have this to go back to though.
What?
I have this to go back to.
Right. It's like, we'll implement as much as we can, and that it is meant to be a flexible tool of like the days that are regular, great. We're going to follow our plan as much as we can. And when it's not, it's not. And that's okay. Like one of the things that I didn't realize until I got into it is that if I'm following my routines and rhythms most of the time, that things get kept up with. So like the laundry usually gets done. The dishes usually get done. The weird random things that pile up, like change your air filters, they usually get done. And if you're like working on them a little bit all the time, when you have that day where you're like, somebody got sick or we're going on vacation or holiday time and we're doing some special activity, it's okay because all those things have been maintained. And I'm not freaking out but I have to do laundry today or we're not going to have any underwear tomorrow. Like that doesn't happen to me at this point because the laundry usually got done. The dishes usually got put away. And that is a like level of freedom that when we have ADHD, we don't realize is even available to us because we've lived in the hot mess express for so long. But it's possible.
It is. Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm excited for the next module.
Me too. And I guess while Camden's wrapping up, if you all would like to join, daily planning is available anytime. You can sign up whenever you want. And that class it's self-guided through about 2 hours of videos. So you can hyper-focus and like blast through them as quick as you can, or you can spread them out. It's up to you. And then we meet every Wednesday for 30 minutes as like a support group. So sometimes people have questions about the material. And then sometimes it's just like, I'm really struggling with fill in the blank. Like there's been times where we've talked about like, or I'm struggling with personal hygiene, or I have questions about medication, or I'm trying to deal with my kid is having a lot of, I don't know if they're meltdowns or tantrums. What do I do? Like the time is whatever the group needs. So there's that connection point of not feeling alone. We have a community where you can post questions or ask for advice, help other moms. And it's not on Facebook, so that way you don't have to worry about getting sucked into the Facebook time warp. Now the waitlist is available right now. Head on over to bit.ly/TMM waitlist. That's all lowercase letters, bit.ly/TMM and that's linked in the show notes, of course, so that you can be the first one to know when Time Management Mastery opens, which is next week. But if you're on the waitlist, perhaps you'll get in a little bit early. Time Management Mastery for ADHD moms is an 11-week program where you'll create a flexible framework for your day so that you can go from whack-a-mole problem solving to knowing exactly what you want to get done today and how you're going to do it. So hop on over to that waitlist so that you can get your awesome bonuses and early access. And I'm so excited. Like now that it's like real and tangible and I can feel it in my hands. Whereas before it was all like, well, I'm doing this for me. Is it going to work for everyone else? It's like, it did, it worked. Like, I'm so excited. I can't wait to see how this changes. Not just ADHD moms, but like as a whole, because to me, like when I am working with a mom, I am teaching that skills to the mom who is then going to teach them to her family. Like this is like a ripple out effect. And so while I say my class is only for moms, it's because I'm talking to moms, and yes, I'm going to mention boogers and vomit because that's what moms do. But I know that you are the leader of your family and that you are then going to be able to teach that to your family. And it's not like the skill isn't only applicable to moms, like not like only moms can make schedules. But it's a life skill that we were either not taught or not taught in an ADHD friendly way that is doable. And so once we're speaking the same language, we can then utilize that skill and then teach it to others. So remember, head over to the website, join the waitlist for Time Management Mastery right now before someone starts yelling mom, like I'm pretty sure someone's yelling in the background right now. One more time, that is bit.ly/TMM waitlist. That's bit.ly/TMM waitlist. And I'll talk to you next time, Successful Mama. For more resources, classes, and community, head over to my website, motherhoodinadhd.com.